beat out several other companies that were bidding, including Fidelity. So Fidelity was one of the other bidders. Brian Armstrong from Coinbase was quoted as saying that they have about 10% of all the Bitcoins in circulation right now in custody, which is actually a pretty big amount, especially because it's still, I believe it's still in the early stages. If they continue at this pace, somebody was quoted as saying that from a diversification standpoint, it is a lot of risk because they have a lot of coins under custody. And what happens is what the quote says: what happens if someday one entity has custodian of all these coins? Aren't we just creating the same broken financial system? So right now at 10%, that is a decent amount. I think that eventually with the regulations that are going to be in place, there might be in the future some objections to some of these large acquisitions and things, because they don't want any one company having too much power there. And it's true from a diversification standpoint. If I have my money in Coinbase, I wouldn't want to have too much in the case there's some type of a hack or I'm unable to access my assets. So I would like to, me personally, I like to keep my cryptos diversified between different companies as well as in different hard wallets and things like that. Another interesting fact about the company Zappos, their custody business was actually, it's in a huge bunker in Switzerland. So it's an old Swiss military bunker, and it's 1,000 feet inside a mountain. So I've seen a couple of pictures and some videos of it, and it's pretty cool how secure it looks. But that I'm sure that's not the only reason why they purchased it. They're getting a huge footprint now in the custody business, and the custody business now is getting very competitive. Speaking of Switzerland, there is a group of six lawmakers that are going there to discuss Libra. They're going to the Federal Data Protection and Information Commission in Switzerland, and the head of that group of six is Maxine Walters, and many of you might have heard from her. She's the one that's anti-Libra, and she's the one that basically sent a letter to Washington that they should put this whole project on hold. They believe it's a new threat to the consumers as well as the global economy. And even though Facebook proposes that it's going to be putting out the Libra in 2020, to put on hold of it is just out of the question, to put it on hold right now. If you compare that to the auto industry is over 100 years old. And could you imagine if 100 years ago they would have said to Ford, let's hold off on building a car because we want to talk about driver's side airbags or, some daytime running lights and things like that. The auto industry today is still getting regulated 100 years later. So just to put this Facebook Libra project on hold because they think it's going to be a threat to consumers, it just doesn't make sense to me. So hopefully they'll learn a lot when they're in Switzerland. There's several other lawmakers that are there with them, and hopefully that'll be something positive will come out of it. In other news, China has announced that they're almost ready with their own sovereign digital currency. As you guys know, the PBOC has been trying to create a Bitcoin rival for the last 5 years. But the issue that I see with this is that when I read through the fine print, they said it's not going to rely on blockchain, that blockchain is too slow for their vast volume. It's also going to be issued by a central bank and also by financial institutions. So I just question if this is going to be really a centralized currency or if it's going to actually even compete with Bitcoin. They also never mentioned when it was going to come out. They just said they're almost ready, and we've been hearing this for several years now. As you know, there's a lot of accusations against China with regard to stealing intellectual property as well as manipulating currencies. In fact, last Monday, the United States, the Treasury Department formally accused China of currency manipulation. So I wonder if this is going to be a viable threat to Bitcoin. In my opinion, there's room for both of them. Me personally, there's a lot of people out there as well that don't trust Facebook because of their privacy issues, and they question Facebook Libra. So I'm sure that there's a lot of other people that are questioning this new sovereign digital currency out of China. Some other news, there's been a lot of talk of scandals and currency scandals and currency crypto scandals over the last few months. It's going to continue until there's a little more regulation in place. But this token in question was, they claim it was several $billion worth. It was a Ponzi scheme. It was called the Plus token. It's been around since mid 2018. The first red flag that I saw when I first heard about this was that it promises a high yield investment returns. So they're promising all these people, returns in the teens, and that's on a monthly basis. So they said you could get up to 18% per month ROIs. So that's the first red flag that I saw. And also they have this secret, it's like a black box arbitrage trading bot. And they also claim that they had 10 million members recently, and they're also a bunch of tiers of membership. But if you look into this company, they're involved in several other multi-level marketing schemes where there's basically different levels of membership and different levels of making money if you get your friends to join. Some of the other things, when you look up CoinMarketCap and you look up, say, CoinGecko and Etherscan, you can never find any of these tokens on there. There's nothing on GitHub regarding any code, and you're unable to find any public source code. So that was discovered this week by some overseas company, and they basically tracked a lot of the coins that came from there, and they were basically dumping millions of dollars on the exchange markets and cashing in them for Bitcoin. So there were a lot of red flags there, but unfortunately they said that it was $2 to $3 billion worth of money that was basically stolen. And like I said, there was a lot of red flags, but I think people tend to ignore them or believe their own lies when they hear about this stuff, and they're just looking for the high returns. They were in print that said it was between 6 and 18% per month ROI. So obviously a lot of these people got taken. There is another token that they're involved with that's called the Cloud token. And the Cloud token, if you look into the screenshots from some of their slide decks, there's 21 different levels they have, similar to like a multi-level marketing scheme. And in the first level, there's a 100% matching bonus. And it goes all the way down 20 other levels where it ends up at 5%. So between 100% matching bonus and 5% matching bonus, those are some other red flags that people should be looking into. If anyone has any comments on these, they could either comment in the message portion of Camfrog or Pal Talk if you want to discuss this further. So right now, I'll just start reading off all the news stories over the last week and trends in the marketplace, and we could basically figure out where we'll go from there. We'll also end up with a Q&A, and I'll also give you some updates on some of the other stories we had over the last few weeks. The next one is a story about Kik. We talked about Kik in our last episode on Crypto Talk number 4. Yesterday there was a story printed out in the National Law Review. National Law Review is something similar to like a Wall Street Journal or a New York Times for lawyers. It's a print edition, and they also have an online edition. So basically, it seemed to me like the gist of the article was pretty negative about Kik. It said that they were unorthodox, controversial, combative, and aggressive in their answer. And I had listened to some podcasts over the weekend on the Kik complaint, and there was 2 ways that they could have went about answering the complaint, or either answering the complaint or gone to a motion to dismiss. But the attorneys on this podcast that I listened to basically said the motion to dismiss would have taken a lot longer to go to trial, because they would have to file the motion to dismiss, and it would be 30 to 60 days for the SEC to get back to them, and then they'd have 30 to 60 days to respond back. So I think the attorneys decided to just do an answer instead, and they think that that might be a quicker way to a solution. There was some talks back in January with Kik and the SEC where the SEC reached out to Kik to discuss a settlement, but obviously they didn't come to terms. There was a Wells notice that was issued by the SEC, which most people or most companies will keep the Wells notice, under wraps. They'll announce that there was a Wells notice, but sometimes they won't publicize it. What Kik did was Kik actually sent it out to everybody and posted it on social media, and they also came up with a fund to go against the SEC. The fund is called Defend Crypto, and you guys, if you want to take a look, you could Google it. But what they did was they contributed $5 million of their own money, of Kik's money, and they asked for contributions from a lot of the people in the crypto space. And if you look into who donated, there was a lot of big players that are actually helping them in their legal defense. Prior to starting this fund, they had spent $6 million of Kik's money on defending themselves. So now it looks like there's going to be a total of about $11 to $13 million that's been spent on this, but hopefully they'll come up with some type of resolution that's going to be good for the crypto space. I think the last time I checked, it was almost $2 million added on top of that $5 million that they contributed. So that's a good thing. I know a lot of people who have contributed to that, and hopefully they'll come up with some type of solution. They are disputing, again, like we mentioned last week, they're disputing the Howey test. A lot of the cryptocurrencies don't think that the Howey test should apply to cryptocurrency. I'm not sure if any of you guys know the Howey test is from 1946, and it basically originated from it was some type of land dispute, or there was basically a landlord and a landowner and a person that was going to operate the land in Florida to grow citrus fruits, and they were doing some type of deal where they would maintain the land and then they would split the profits when they sold the fruit. So this Howey test is basically it's over 70 years old, and obviously a lot has changed in the last 70 years. So I don't know if the Howey test is appropriate for this, but we'll find out. It might take a year or more for us to get the results of this kick complaint, unless they fast track it or they come up with something that's going to be a little bit better for both parties. But there is a great piece of work that I read from one of the SEC commissioners. Her name was Hester Pierce, and she wrote a letter to Washington, and it was called Howey. So Howey from the Howey test. She's one of the commissioners. There's 4 other commissioners, but she's one that's pretty for crypto. So I think it's a really good letter. I think if you could sense the frustration in her letter on how the SEC is reacting to this cryptocurrencies, to passing regulations and things like that. But hopefully we'll get to where we want to be sooner rather than later, because there's a lot of other companies that are going to be affected by this. So hopefully maybe they'll come up with some new tests. Maybe it'll be the kick test or something like that, because 1946, that's a long time to go through that law. So what else? So back to Coinbase. Coinbase, we talked about their attempted hack last week. They're in the news again this week. They're a big player out there, so they're going to be in the news every week. But this one was a little bit, scared me a little when I saw that there was a glitch with the passwords that affected, it only affected 3,500 of their accounts. So their explanation was that it was a password storage issue, and that it was only an internal issue where the passwords were actually stored in plain text on their internal servers. So if you received an email from Coinbase regarding your account to reset your password, I don't know if I believe all those emails that come through, but maybe you could try to log in and make sure that you're actually logging into Coinbase before changing your password, just in case it's a phishing attempt. But there were 3,500 accounts that were affected by that password glitch. I don't think it was anything as bad as a hack. There are 30 million users on Coinbase. They're a huge company. I think they're going to be around for a long time. But approximately 3,500 accounts were hacked. So that was newsworthy this week. And speaking of Coinbase, there was also a big win for them this week, which some people might consider it a win. I knew right off the bat once I read the complaint. They were sued for fraud from back in 2017 when Bitcoin Cash was forked. The name of the case is Burke versus Coinbase, and they were accused of fraud because they said they were improperly freezing the trading of Bitcoin Cash immediately after launching the asset. Now, I'm not sure how many people on these channels have received the Bitcoin Cash, but it was a little bit of a debacle. I don't think that Coinbase was intentionally doing anything fraudulent. There was some accusations of insider trades and things like that. I don't think Coinbase was aware of it. Maybe they were aware of it after they looked into it. But when they did the original Coinbase fork, it was probably, if I recall correctly, it was in the summer of 2007. I owned some Bitcoin back then, and Coinbase originally said that they weren't going to support the fork, which meant that if I had my Bitcoins in Coinbase, I wouldn't have received, if you want to call it a dividend, I wouldn't have received the dividend of the Bitcoin Cash. So they were basically sending us emails that they weren't thinking of supporting it. And then all of a sudden, in December, one of my friends called me. I think it was like a Tuesday or a Wednesday night, and we were wrapping up the workday. And one of my friends called me. He's retired, and he said, "Did you check your Coinbase account?" And I said, "No, why?" And he said, "I just noticed that there's a new line item under my Ethereum for Bitcoin Cash." So I immediately logged in and noticed that I had a dividend of some Bitcoin Cash in there. So what I did immediately was I tried to go and see what the value was. And once I went in there, I don't remember what the value of Bitcoin Cash was at the time, but it was up to $9,500 per coin. So everybody was basically freaking out. There was a lot of text that I received. There were people inside our office that were also investors in Bitcoin that received the dividend in Coinbase, and we were all trying to figure out if we should sell some of it. It was almost like found money because it was just basically a dividend from the Bitcoin. And a lot of us tried to log in. There was a lot of emails and social media posts going on about it, but I don't think it was ever worth the 9,500. It never got up there again. But Coinbase was smart enough to basically just shut down the trading on Bitcoin Cash, so you were unable to transfer it out of your account. You were unable to trade it, and I'm not exactly sure if anybody did get out at that 9,500. If anybody did, and they're on these chat rooms and everything, if you could just let us know. But I did eventually sell it. I sold it, several months later, but it was nowhere near 9,500. So basically, the verdict was U.S. District Court for Northern District of California. They dismissed the fraud charges and the unfair competition charges on Coinbase. However, that was only part of the case on the Burke versus Coinbase. The other parts of the case were that there was some other issues regarding negligence. So that's still at large right now. So we don't know how that's going to turn out. Do I think Coinbase was a little negligent? I think that they should have given us advance notice before they actually distributed the token. I think that the way that they handled it by just shutting it down wasn't appropriate. I think that there's probably going to be some type of settlement. There's probably going to be some monetary fine or something for Coinbase, but that's just my opinion. I'm not an attorney. I read the disclaimer in the beginning of the broadcast, and I'll read it again at the end, but this is not legal advice. This is just my opinion. But I do hope that they establish some type of precedent and standards, because I think there needs to be a lot of these exchanges out there between the hacking and things that they're basically lax on. There should be accountability, and there should be some type of fines, against some of these exchanges and stuff, because I think it's going to be a step in the right direction, and a legal precedent for something like this wouldn't hurt. Another big news, which has been it's big news that they're actually approved, but it's got approved for a charter by the New York Financial Services Department in New York. So now we know that they're finally approved, and in the middle of September, towards the end of September, I think the date is September 23rd, they're going to be approved. The difference between these futures are that they're going to be physically settled with Bitcoin, as opposed to the ones from the CME or the Chicago Merc Exchange. Those were cash settled, so they wouldn't really affect the Bitcoin price that much. I think we're going to basically see how much of this was baked into the price of Bitcoin, because this news has been around for a while, but it's hard to know exactly how much of this was priced into Bitcoin already. But it's definitely a watershed moment, and I think it's good for crypto. Another good positive news that I just read. I mean, this might be news it's probably a few weeks old and stuff, but I can't read all the news. There's so much news that comes out and stuff, but it's positive for crypto, in my opinion. There was a mutual fund manager that I owned his mutual funds back several years ago, and he was beating the S&P for 15 years straight. His name is Bill Miller, and he's an older gentleman. He's probably 70 years old, and he's actually been a big fan of crypto for the last several months, and his hedge fund is actually up. For the first 6 months of the year, his hedge fund is up 46%. The reason why his hedge fund is up so high is because he's actually a traditional value investor, but he's actually investing in Bitcoin now. So in December of 2017, he did his research into Bitcoin. I probably did it earlier, but in December of 2017, he allocated 50%. That's 50 of his fund into Bitcoin. That's a huge bet. His funds have been volatile lately. Back when he was running the Leg Mason Value Fund, I had some money in there and it was doing great. After that, his funds and his hedge funds were very volatile. I mean, you could make or lose 20 or 30% in a month with his fund. But he is a shrewd investor. I have a lot of respect for him. I invested with him in the mutual fund business back years ago. I'm not in his hedge fund, but basically he has $1.5 million of assets under management. So I think he's a shrewd dude. He's not a little hack. Like there are some of these hacks out there that will put 50% in Bitcoin, which is a really risky bet and everything. I think it is risky that he put 50% in there, but I do respect him. I think he's a smart guy. And even his Miller Opportunity Fund, which is another fund that he runs, it's up 18% through July, and it's beating 90% of its peers. So I don't think he's like I said, I don't think he's a hack. I think it's a good thing that he's actually an old school Wall Street guy. And most of my old school Wall Street guys, even guys in their 40s and 50s, they won't touch Bitcoin or any cryptocurrency with a 10-foot pole. Some of my friends, I try to convince them just to put a small amount into Bitcoin. And these guys are in their 40s, but they're afraid of Bitcoin. They're afraid of crypto, and they think they're going to lose their shirt. So that's that news. And in some other news, there was a California man that this week I read about, I think on Monday or Sunday, that he was sentenced to 70 months in jail for selling drugs over the dark web for crypto. He was selling fentanyl for crypto. He ended up getting caught, and now he's going to do 70 months in jail. I don't think that this would have been that newsworthy, but the only reason why it probably made a lot of the news wires is because it wasn't because of the fentanyl. That's common. Drug dealers are common these days, but I think it's because he was basically selling it for crypto. So another story that I wanted to talk about, it's really a follow-up to the other stories from crypto episode number 3, which we discussed the IRS sending out letters to a lot of people that were investing in crypto. Those were different types of letters. Those were basically just letters that in case you didn't file for your crypto trades and everything like that, you should file. But now I just read this week that the IRS has sent out another round of letters, but this one's a little bit stronger, the letters. They're called a CP 2000, and basically it states in a letter that you've misreported income from cryptocurrency transactions. There are actual dollar amounts that they've assessed people for, so they're actually assessing people for principal plus interest. Since people haven't filed, it was a 2017 tax return, it basically has a little bit over a year of interest. The letters started going out at the end of July, but I saw on CoinDesk that they received some other letters from people that were basically in August. So if you receive those letters, obviously some of the people disputed the letters and said that you're basically charging us principal and interest on the whole amount of crypto I invested. So obviously if you invested it and you bought crypto at $5,000 and you sold at $10,000, you only have to pay a gain, obviously, on $5,000 difference. So these are not just informational letters like the other IRS letters. These you actually have to respond to. I would check with your tax advisor. Like I said, this is not advice on the show. It's just my opinion. Hopefully a lot of you people didn't receive them. I did go to a lot of crypto meetups at the end of in the middle of 2018, and I did meet a lot of people that just said that they weren't going to file. Those are probably the people that are getting the letters, and it's just something you can't basically ignore, because since you probably have bank accounts with fiat money in them, they can be levied, and that's one of the reasons why people like cryptocurrency. If you have all your money in cryptocurrency accounts, the IRS might have a hard time levying those. And another thing I'd like to mention, that I did see some of the letters online on Twitter and on social media. The letters, some of the people redacted some of the information from the letters, but it actually shows who the reporting entity was, and it was Coinbase. But we knew all along that Coinbase was starting to give information to the IRS. So this is just them following up, and there should be, according to the IRS, they anticipated receiving billions of dollars in tax revenues from crypto. So it's your obligation to self-report, even if you don't receive any 1099s from your crypto exchanges. A lot of the crypto exchanges are overseas. Most likely, you're not going to receive anything from the overseas accounts, but Coinbase is based in San Francisco. They're going to report you if you have a certain amount of cryptocurrencies, but even if you're under that amount, you're still supposed to self-report. So that's some of the news that I wanted to discuss today. One of the other reports that I read, it's an older report, but there's a company out there called Chainalysis, and they basically pulled a lot of information based on cryptos, and their conclusion on a lot of the accounts, not just large accounts, but they concluded that 1/3 of the crypto hasn't moved in 3 years. So that's definitely a positive sign. So it's either, it could be that there's long-term holders out there that actually still have faith and strong enough convictions in Bitcoin, and that's why they haven't moved them and they don't want to liquidate them. It could be maybe that they don't want to move them because they don't want to pay taxes. But there's another reason that they might not have moved in 3 years. It could be because of the private keys are missing or lost. There's a lot of numbers floating around there, but some people say that there's 2 million, some people say 3 million, and some people even say 4 million, that there's 4 million Bitcoins out there that are lost. And I know some people that have lost cryptos, lost Bitcoins. Even our producer here has lost some of the smaller altcoins based upon, lost email addresses, old computers, old devices and stuff. And I have a few people that I know that are still searching for old laptops that they have Bitcoin on when they bought Bitcoin at a few $100s and didn't think it was going to go anywhere before the Mt. Gox hack. After the Mt. Gox hack, that's when they basically, either upgraded their devices and didn't move the crypto off there. They forgot what their seeds were, or they have them on a Trezor device somewhere that they can't locate. But that's basically the report that I read on Chainalysis. So I just wanted to see if there was anyone that had any questions. We did receive some, I'm just reading some of the comments here and stuff. Let's see, on some of the apps, but there's no questions there, but we did receive some questions through the email last week, and every week we put out the email. Our email is cryptotalk@peerstream.com if you want to send in any questions or comments. One of the questions was just this afternoon that said that there's another ICO. They asked me about an ICO that they heard about that was a crypto exchange, and they were going to raise $100 million. I'm not aware of any ICO that they're putting out right now that's over $100 million, but there was an IPO, an initial public offering, that was put out that on the news channels that I saw, that's called INX. And what they're doing is they're looking to raise money. They're looking to raise between $5 million and $129 million. If they don't raise $5 million, they're basically not going to go forward with the IPO. But the company's called INX. They're based out of Gibraltar. So typically, if a U.S. company wants to do an IPO, an initial public offering, they'll file what's known as an S-1, and that's a registration statement that's filed with the SEC before they go public, and that's the first step. It's similar to a prospectus, but since this company, INX, is based out of Gibraltar, they filed an F-1. As we've stated in many episodes before, there's a lot of countries out there that are more crypto-friendly than the United States. So they file the F-1. This is going to be the first security token sale registered with the SEC. So that's the only large fundraising transaction that I've heard, either an ICO or an IPO, that has to do with the crypto market, and that's a cryptocurrency exchange. So that was the first question I received. Another question I received, which we've discussed in 2 episodes, in Crypto Talk number 1 and Crypto Talk number 2, they asked for an update on the Tron launch. They're probably asking because they think it's going to be positive for the crypto community. I also think it's going to be positive for the crypto community because, as we all know, Warren Buffett is not really a cryptocurrency fan. He's a crypto bear. He equates it to rat poison. There is a chance that if there is a lunch with Justin Sun from Tron, as well as some other crypto enthusiasts, and they enlighten Warren Buffett, there is a chance that he'll change his viewpoint and say it's not rat poison, and possibly he might even become a big fan of cryptocurrency. It's highly unlikely, but I don't think that there's any downside to that lunch. I mean, what's worse than saying that Bitcoin is rat poison? So I haven't seen any update on that since last month. The last I heard was he had kidney stones, and he postponed the crypto lunch. And I think I haven't really heard much on there, and there hasn't been much news on there. If anybody's heard of anything about that Tron lunch, you could either write it in the comments section and let us know. The third question we had was based upon their research and articles that they've read. They were asking me about the electricity use in mining of Bitcoin, and that was in the news the last few months that people have, probably the last 6 months that people have been complaining, including in this question, they asked it that it uses more electricity than the country of Ireland. Their mining does use a lot of electricity and stuff, but my opinion on the electricity is is basically generated worldwide based upon the needs of consumers. So if you're using electricity, you're paying for the electricity yourself. So, for instance, my daughter wants to leave on her air conditioning. I say the air conditioning, I'm going to cut it off when you're not around because it's basically just wasting money. So the people who are using the electricity are paying for the electricity, and it's based upon the needs of consumers. So it's not really, we're not really, in my opinion, we're not really running out of electricity. If the people are willing to pay for it, the miners, whoever it is, or you're paying for it through your transaction fees, it is using a lot of electricity, but I don't think it's a totally net negative. If people don't want to use it, they don't have to use it. If people want to save money with electricity, they'll shut off the lights or they'll turn off the air conditioning or whatever they're using. So I really don't think it's that big of a deal. There are a lot of other cryptocurrencies that you could purchase out there. There's over 2,000 other cryptocurrencies, and some of them use proof of work, some of them use proof of stake, some of them use other ways to generate the tokens besides mining. So you do have a choice, and you can purchase other cryptocurrencies if you don't want to purchase Bitcoin because of the electricity use. So I don't see any other. Did we have any more questions? Yeah, we don't really have any other questions, but before we wrap it up, I wanted to just do my regular shout outs for the people that help us every week. Jason and Alex for their input in creating the show. Briley has always been a great help, and Mike here at PeerStream. They do all the pre-production assistance with all the setups of the cameras and the stages here and everything we use it, and also for Jared, Caitlin, and Jane. For their assistance in getting the word out to our Pal Talk and Camfrog audience. We'll let you know when the next episode is going to be. I don't think it's going to be next week. I'm going to be on vacation. If it is next week, you'll hear about it by a push notification, or there'll be some type of ad that'll basically let you know. We're also looking to do this in the future 24/7, so you could basically log in and talk crypto in a chat room format as much as you guys want. Just log back into Crypto Talk on these platforms periodically. It'll probably be available starting today, possibly after the show. So if you guys log back in, you guys could chat amongst yourselves. And if you guys have any comments on making the show better in the future, you could just send an email. Or if you have any questions for future episodes that you didn't think of now that you think of before the next week or so, you could just send an email to cryptotalk@peerstream.com. And that's it for this week, and I will talk to you guys in 2 weeks.